Hi there, this is Solitary Ronan from Solitary Ronan Films, and welcome to another random review. Today's random review comes from Czechoslovakia in 1960, and it's Romeo, Juliet and Darkness by Jiri Weiss. Now, Weiss left Czechoslovakia in 1968 when the Russians invaded and went to America. Indicator have 90 Degrees in the Shade, which is the only other Weiss film that I have seen, which is a lovely little film, but Romeo, Juliet and Darkness is one of my favourite films that I've watched in 2023. I think it's absolutely fantastic and just about perfect. This might come as a shock, but I'm not the biggest fan of Romeo and Juliet or Romeo and Juliet films, but add Nazis in Prague in 1942, when it's Czechoslovakia's turn to have a roundup of Jews, and the story of an apartment building and a young man who finds a young Jewish girl, well, I say young, they're both probably about 18, hiding because she's refused to turn herself in, so she's hiding, and that's basically the setup of the film. It's only 92 minutes, it flies by, it's so economic, and I certainly do love an economic film. It's not Bressonian per se, but it's certainly got that feel. Weiss doesn't really add fluff or make the scenes any longer than they really need to be. There is just a wonderful economy in the film. There's not a ton of dialogue. It is very terse and to the point. This is a second run DVD. It's funny, second run Blu-rays are pretty expensive, but you can actually find a bunch of the DVDs fairly cheaply on eBay, and with the DVDs you still get a booklet. I do have a ton of second run DVDs that I need to watch. So it's not a big cast either, which again gives it a kind of chamber piece feel. It gives it a much more claustrophobic feel, which is a complete, it's diametrically opposed to the big wide shots of the empty streets. At the start of the film we see a Jewish family having to leave and go somewhere else. And so we have the young man, his mother, his grandfather. His mother is making, or does kind of do dress work and repair work on people's clothes, to try and obviously make a little bit of money and to have a place in this new kind of society where everybody's paranoid and everybody doesn't want to upset anybody in case they get to disappear in the middle of the night. We also see a little bit about the resistance and hiding Jewish people when we see the young man's classroom, and every now and again men in trench coats come in and they ask a certain person to go with them, people whose families have been accused of sheltering Jewish people. They all get disappeared themselves. So you do get the feeling of obviously large stakes, and if you do get on the wrong side or you help somebody out, you're liable that you and your family are going to get executed. There's a wonderful shot when the young man's in the streets and he does see a list of all the names that have been executed or have to be executed. And Weiss uses a lot of really nice camera techniques, as the young man is kind of overwhelmed by this list. The image kind of goes in and out of focus. There's a beautiful, not necessarily a dream sequence, but an imagined sequence featuring a lot more freedom than they have when the young man and the young woman do a little bit of dancing in the loft where she's hiding, and then all of a sudden we see the open sky and clouds and their faces spinning round. It's quite a beautiful little scene by Weiss. You have other characters who are more open to the Germans and do the Germans favours to kind of be on their good side. Possible troublemakers who might obviously expose the young woman again to get favours from the Germans. So you have the grandfather who just keeps his head down and fidgets about with little inventions and little machinery. As I say, you have his mother trying to do what's best for the family. At one point the grandfather says that she was asked to make a dress out of human skin, she would do it just to keep on the right side as far as not getting into trouble, not necessarily the right side of obviously morally or whatever. So you have all these little dynamics because the whole film is essentially about what people do in those situations, what choices you make to protect yourself, protect your own family. Would you give somebody up that is going to die if you give them up, or do you put your own family and yourself at risk to protect that person, a person that you don't actually know that well, apart from them being a human being? That obviously some people have views on the Jews. The young woman herself has a preconception about the young man because he's an Aryan, which he obviously poo-poos. So again, it shows everybody's got their own preconceptions about what people are like just because of their race or their class, or as people do. And then obviously all into this, the pair kind of start falling for each other, but it's done in a kind of naturalistic way. I mean, obviously I don't believe that it happens that quickly, but never mind. The film is only 92 minutes long after all, but you do get a wonderful kind of Weiss-like tension, pardon the pun, as the authorities kind of get closer and closer. They increase the number of raids in the building. Again, that's kind of set in the backdrop of one of the kind of leading German overseers that were kind of put in charge of the town or the city has been assassinated. So obviously the Germans kind of ramp up raids and security, and they're looking for people that are obviously sympathetic and perhaps have been involved in the assassination. And because it's kind of mostly set in this apartment block, apart from, as I say, you get nice wide empty streets, usually shot in the sunshine as if, you know, it's a lovely day. Again, as the film draws to a climax, you do get this sense of pressure cooker, and as certain characters are going to blow the secret or not, some characters change their stance on the woman, and then again that shifts the dynamic to the consequences of the decisions and who's going to be affected in a negative way by their decision. It's just a tremendous film. Again, 92 minutes, it rattles by. Even I, the old cynic, would quite like them to get together and escape. Whether that happens or not, you'll have to watch the film. But it is one of the second run DVDs that you should really get a Blu-ray, because the black and white cinematography is really excellent. There's lots of beautiful shots, and as I say, there's some wonderful creative choices and artistic shots by Weiss that are really quite beautiful. So that's Romeo, Juliet and Darkness from 1960. I would highly recommend it if you can get a hold of it. Again, second run DVDs are fairly cheap on eBay and perhaps other secondary markets. But please let me know if you've seen Romeo, Juliet and Darkness. For me, it's automatically my favourite Romeo and Juliet film. But as always, I'd be keen to hear what you think. So thanks very much for watching this random review, and hopefully join me again for more random reviews. This is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, saying farewell.